to Civilization Jihad Awareness, the show where truth wins every time. This show talks about about what is called Civilization Jihad. It is the show that exposes the Islamist attack on North America and the world as a whole. Now, what does that mean? A Civilization Jihad is generally a very quiet type of jihad. It talks about things like bribing people to get into office. It talks about several little things, moving in, as we see in Europe, the mass migration into Europe to control through creating through Muslim Brotherhood front groups. Now, we have with us Dr. Ahmet S. Yayla. Now, Dr. Yayla has been with us before, and he was such a fountain of information. He is an incredible writer. So he's joining us today to share a very, very important bit of information about what is basically hot jihad, where we actually see the actions. And his article, which is linked above the chat room window, you'll see the link to his article. His article is called "ISIS Tries to Activate Amateur Attackers in the West." A little bit more about Dr. Yayla. He is an adjunct professor of criminology, law, and society at George Mason University. He formerly served as a professor and the chair of the Sociology Department at Harran University in Turkey. He's also served as the chief of Counterterrorism and Operations Department of the Turkish National Police in Sutliff. Do not think I pronounced that correctly. Between 2010 and 2013, he is the co-author of the newly released book "ISIS Defectors: Inside Stories of the Terrorist Caliphate." And you can follow him on Twitter at AHMES YAYLA. Now, he's with us in the chat room just waiting. With us. Let me just bring Dr. Yayla on. Hello, Dr. Yayla. Thank you for joining us.
Hello, good afternoon. Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's exciting. I tell you, when I read your article, I was kind of mind blown that here we have. It's almost kind of confusing to think about how we have a group of terrorists who are organizing and trying to recruit more terrorists, but in releasing the information to create more jihadi type actions, they're actually telling everybody what they're doing, which is almost kind of detrimental to the point, isn't it?
It is, but at the same time, after this point, their tactics are all open, and it has been for years. Different terrorist organizations working on those tactics, coming from the leftist heritage, basically from the Latin American terrorists, and then jumping towards Northern Africa and then Europe, combining those experiences and tactics in Syrian Bekaa Valley with the Palestinian organization called PLO, which was led by Yasser Arafat, and then Al-Qaeda and finally ISIS joining those traditions, acquiring a huge heritage of terrorism, experience and tactics coming from history, and using those to their advantage.
So I'm just going to start out. I sent Dr. Yayla the questions I really wanted to ask, and I think I wanted to make sure he was ready for some of the things I had. And it's kind of interesting because I'll tell you, his article, I say you should read it. It's powerful. So I'm just going to start right off. It says, I wrote, this is my first question to him was this. You're right that the Islamic State that the Islamic State's new publication, the Lone Wolf's Handbook, gives instructions for committing 6 acts, which I'll call acts of jihad and terrorism. Those 6 acts are, now this is listen closely, burning vehicles, forest fires, car accidents, which are, when he's saying when they're writing about car accidents, they're actually talking about multiple car incidents, or you have a multi-car accident on a freeway or a throughway. They're not talking small potatoes here. Bombs, vehicular homicides, exploding buildings. So the first three might be hard to see as acts of jihad and terror, which are burning vehicles, forest fires, and car accidents. Do you see this as a type of secretive jihad?
I don't know how we name it, but actually these are like very basic attacks of terrorists, low-level terrorist attacks, and where in most cases different terrorist organizations in the past, just like the ISIS and Al-Qaeda, asked from their younger members to carry out those attacks, both as practice, so that those kids would learn how to carry out attacks and would learn how to win over their anxiety. At the same time, an attack is attack, particularly for the Islamic State. An attack in the West is more important than what they are doing in Syria and Iraq. They consider one attack in the West equals to at least 10 attacks in Syria or in Mosul, in Iraq. Therefore, it looks like they're out of cells or powers that they could carry out professional type terrorist attacks in the West. Basically, what they are trying to do is mobilizing their younger supporters and giving them some kinds of understanding and tools, basically navigating them to carry out those low-level attacks, which really does not require any experience and very easy to carry out, and you don't need to spend money.
That's the big thing that I've been learning about. I've been taking classes in intelligence analysis through Henley Putnam, and through research I had to do on a paper I was working on, I found out that a lot of terror acts today are basically committed with almost no cost involved, very low cost. Even the making of a bomb these days is very low cost due to their instruction manuals. It's
definitely
it's kind of scary.
Myth. Yeah, we have this myth sometimes. Everybody tends to believe that terrorism requires a lot of money. Yes, as a whole, for organizational level, it requires a lot of money. But for the people on the ground who are dedicated to the cause, they don't do this for money. They don't do this for financial gains. They do this for their ideologies. Therefore, they don't need any money to carry out terrorist attacks.
It's a very important point. You write about your experiences attempting to stop and catch those committing car burnings. Would you please share those experiences?
Sure. Now, in my case, they started a campaign. They call it a campaign. So it was the campaign of car burning. Basically, what they do is after midnight, or depending on when the air goes dark, as soon as it is dark outside, they started to burn cars. And like in my case, Şanlıurfa is a huge city with a population of 2 million. And what they would do was burn cars very fast at the different parts of the city. So then, as a police, you try to control your city, figure out where you would have fires, and also try to figure out who would do that and how you could catch them before or just after they start the fire becomes a challenge, because they could do that in 5-6 different places. It is very easy to burn cars. You basically pour some gas on a tire and then start the fire. That's it. There is no evidence if you cannot get those people with the gas or at the time of burning the car. If there is no CCTV footage, or if nobody sees that kid burning that car, it is almost impossible to catch those criminals or terrorists. So how I caught them? In my case, we used our intelligence tactics and tried to figure out who would do these attacks. And I focused on those people And eventually, by following them, we reached out to the team who were burning out the cars. But by the time you figure out who was doing it or who were behind it, several cars were burned down.
How many cars were probably burnt by that point?
In our case, I think it was around 100.
Wow.
It wasn't a massive campaign as France, as you can remember. In 2013, they burned down around 1,200 cars.
Yeah. And that was in three different cities, I think.
Yes.
Yeah. I can't imagine trying to stop something like that. That to me is, I can see why they're encouraging it, because it seems so impossible to stop. So I read your review of the chapter on car accidents in the handbook. I had the feeling it seemed to tell its readers, through using statistics, that the police are too busy to investigate such a crime. You'll never get caught. Am I right about that?
You are right, but at the same time, what they are trying to do is they are giving those statistics and saying that, hey, this is very common. People do expect car accidents, and dying of a car accident is accepted. If you look at the numbers, like even in the United States, the people who died of car accidents is hundreds of times more than the people who are dying out of terrorism. So basically, the first thing is, this is a very common thing that happens. So if you do it, if you give like a huge damage to your enemy, the first thing they will think is it is an accident. So they will not look out for the perpetrators immediately, which means you have enough time to run away. And this is particularly important for the ISIS, because what they want is to claim that attack. So they want their members to carry out the attack, get lost, and then inform them what they did. Therefore, they can claim it globally.
Wow. So in a sense, this would, I think what they're trying to do in this sense would be to disrupt the Western society as a whole, because one of the things in Western society that's prevalent is people they travel. They go from place to place, and a lot of times using cars. That's attacking the most basic, simple thing that people do. That's
and
scary.
Also, even if it doesn't happen, pumping the fear to the public. While they are losing in Syria and in Mosul, they would like to, show themselves still powerful enough to steer their supporters to carry out attacks in the West.
Now, the concept of forest fires as acts of terrorism in the West isn't new. I thought about it and did some quick research, and originally I thought maybe you and I were seeing something different there, and we kind of talked it out. But France, it seems, is possibly suffering from this handbook's readers, as they have started several fires this month. I don't know if you read that article I shared with you. That's insane. I mean, to see all this stuff happening, you have to stop and wonder. For those of you in the chat room, let's see if I can get that link. The amount of fires that were started is just insane. And it's just this past week. Past month. Is this?
That's another challenge, because you don't have CCTVs in forests usually. It is very difficult to prove who started that fire. And also, in my experience, I lived through these kinds of incidents. When it comes to investigating a forest fire and trying to figure out who started the fire, it is really difficult, because in most cases, the forests are in remote areas without CCTVs, or people would not see, so you wouldn't find anyone who witnessed the crime, therefore making it very difficult to investigate. And at the same time, please don't forget, in 2016, at the beginning of 2016, ISIS released a short video, a 3-minute video. In that video, it asked its followers to carry out suicide track attacks. In fact, in that video, particularly in France, they addressed France and showed a suicide truck attack as an example attack in France. After 5 months, in Nice, exactly the same attack happened. So these kinds of communications, be a manual, be a video, showing terrorists what to do is extremely dangerous because there is usually someone following those suggestions. Hello? Hello?
Close. Hello? Sorry. You're still with us.
Yeah. Okay, good.
I guess my mic went dead for a second. So what I have, I sent you an article, but the Forbes article by Larry Bell. Now, Larry Bell's article talks about actual events that have happened in the United States, and we're talking about Colorado, where major forest fires have taken place. And he talks about a guy who is not small potatoes. He's somebody who investigates fire. He works for the government and he's made statements that fires that happened in 2012 were likely. He specifically mentioned a fire that erupted on June 23rd, 2012, and exploded on June 26th. He's talking about this fire. That was the people who talk about it. I'm just going to read a paragraph. It says, the fire erupted on June 23rd, 2012, and exploded on June 26th, fueled by 100-degree temperatures and single-digit relative humidity and 55 to 65 mile-per-hour winds. It was described by dedicated brave responders who battled it as a firestorm from hell. This is the Waldo Canyon fire he's talking about. And it alone... Let's see. It destroyed. It destroyed 18,247 acres, killed 2 people, destroyed 346 homes, and forced 32,000 people to evacuate. About $15 million in direct costs to fight the fire, just to bring it under control. Were there, and then he's talking about a fire a year later in Black Forest, where 486 homes were burned. 14,280 acres were burned. 2 people were killed, and it goes on. The concept of a forest fire here in the United States, maybe more so than any other country, except out of maybe South America or something in South America or Africa, is just so detrimental. We're talking hundreds of thousands of acres that it's just hard to accept. I'm sorry. It's an amazing impact, I guess.
Definitely.
I wish I could. I don't know. Bell agrees with you. He said he makes the statement that these types of crimes are difficult to prevent and to trace to others too, and he makes that point. So it's. I mean that the article Bell writes, which I'll share in the chat room, was written in 2013. People, and this is what makes it important to understand. They're rehashing stuff that Al Qaeda has. Basically, you said Al Qaeda did this recruitment back. What was it? When did they do? They wrote something about it. Forest fires back.
They have been doing this, yes, but it wasn't only the jihadis. The leftist terrorist organizations use the same tactics. So historically, it is a terrorist tactic, and the jihadis, Salafist jihadi terrorist organizations, learned this from leftist terrorist organizations. So it is an ongoing process. They kind of, based on their wishes or circumstances, make those tactics adjust to today, and then continue to apply those tactics in their daily operations.
It's scary. I mean, I spent half my life up when I was a teenager. I would say half my life back then was up in the mountains in the Adirondacks, and to think about a forest fire in the Adirondacks, that's after having lived, in the middle of the Adirondack State Park. It's just too scary to think about. It actually gets really scary when you think about having lived through that all the time.
Yes.
one of the other things I thought was this is the only thing I probably thought was amusing. I mean, it's a very serious article. And you talk about there's something that the terrorists have to be cautious about. Could you tell people what that was?
They frequently remind that they should not get caught. They are advising them to be very vigilant and careful about the CCTV cameras, about the people around that could see them. So therefore, basically what they are trying to do is not them have caught and then continue to these types of attacks in the future after the first, second, or third attacks. So for them, it is essential to have their cadre who are carrying out those attacks available for the next attack. Be available for the next attack.
Yeah, I think I guess I thought it was kind of humorous because I guess it used the term "save face." I mean, and I think it's because if you're actually a Muslim organization, you might be able to say, well, Muhammad said don't harm the trees. Maybe some Muslim organization might come and try and slap you.
Yeah. That's another situation with those Salafist jihadi terrorist organizations. Often they would twist the Quranic verses or the sayings of the Prophet Muhammad for their own causes or existence, and then carry out activities which are inherently and completely against the religion. Yes, the Prophet Muhammad openly banned, as well as the Quran openly banned, burnings of the live beings, not only human, not only animal, but also the vegetations as well. So based on Islamic rules, you cannot burn down a tree. It is banned. And that's it. There are no other ways around it because it is both in the Quran and the Prophet Muhammad openly banned it. But if you look at the ISIS, even though it is banned, not only the trees, but they are burning people alive. Think about the Jordanian pilot. And when you ask about it, they say, 13th century scholar Ibn Taymiyyah said that you have to counter your enemy with their weapons. And that pilot was dropping napalm bombs on us. So he was burning our children. Now he was burning our children alive. Now we are burning him alive. But it doesn't work this way. This isn't the logic.
And then the next one I thought was, let's see, get back up to that next. I skipped the part. Okay. The 5th through the 8th chapters involve bomb making and placement. It's an area which is considered, quote, normal activity, but for terrorists. I mean, we expect them to use bombs, but I thought it goes a step beyond that because it actually, in talking about placement, they're talking about where to put things in buildings. Could you talk to people a little bit about what that section was about?
Sure. Okay, so that section, those 3 chapters were inherited from the Al-Qaeda. Basically, they edited a well-known Al-Qaeda bomb makers' literature or manual and adapted that manual. And what they're trying to do is for most killed terrorists, most probably around the ages of 20, to produce explosives at their homes, in their kitchens, from daily material which is available at regular markets. Basically, you go to a Walmart, purchase a few stuff that you can use to produce an explosive at your home, and nobody would be suspicious of you because these are the products that other people also buy for their daily life. Now, for some unexperienced terrorists, that might be a little bit scary at first, but they very much in detail, step by step, explained how to produce those explosives first, and then how to produce the detonators so that they can ignite the explosives remotely without harming themselves. And thirdly, they gave in detail where to place those explosives to give the most damage, be if it was a building or if it was going to be like crowded areas, where to put it so that the police or others would not see the explosive, how to hide it, etc.
And this is almost like the manual that the Boston bombers seem to have learned from, it sounds like.
Yes, probably.
At the end of your article, you provide advice to professionals on how to keep us safe. A lot of my connections on LinkedIn are professional law enforcement and people, and they work in various fields from Department of Homeland Security to police officer to detective. I would love for you to share the advice here that you had for them, but I want you to understand that I'm also going to be promoting this, sending this out to those professional law enforcement people on my LinkedIn connections, and to share that with them. So, what advice would you have for them to fight this kind of recommended terrorism by the Islamic State? Yeah.
The first line of defense is knowing your enemy and knowing their tactics. So basically, the law enforcement, the first responders, and the government officers out there, they should be aware of the existence of this manual, the possibility of attacks which are described in this manual. And then also, when it comes to countering terrorism, the most important success comes from the ability or having the ability to think like a terrorist. If our law enforcement people on the street, even like regular police officers, not the FBI alone, can have this ability to think like a terrorist, which means they need to know somewhat about their literature. They need to know what they are learning during their trainings, both ideologically, but at the same time militarily or tactic-wise. And then try to at least have a grasp of their present communications, their social media posts, and try to read their weekly and monthly magazines will give us an ability to oversee those terrorist organizations' activity. So being aware and knowing terrorists will enable us to figure out what could be a risk and what could be an attempt to an attack. The second is we have a lot of officers out there patrolling the cities or going to different places. So they need to be careful as they drive or as they patrol around about these kind of attacks. Basically see their around from an angle or from like a eyeglass to see the people on the streets fit to that profile. If they are carrying like gas in the middle of the night without any reason, that could be a clue, for example. Third, one of the most important line of defense when it comes to countering terrorist attacks, if you don't have any direct intelligence about the upcoming attacks, the best logic is target hardening. Every law enforcement locally can assess the situation by themselves because they are the ones who would know their cities the best and then figure out to protect the most important infrastructures in their cities by different tactics. And today the law enforcement knows how to increase security and how to carry out target hardening operations, so that wouldn't be a difficult task. But particularly where there are a lot of people providing extra security to secure those circumstances so that terrorist attack, the least damage could be imposed on those people is essential. So if I were a chief of police in a city, I would consider these kinds of situations and carry out different measures to increase the security in my city. And also, yes, please.
Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Okay. Also, the dispatch centers, again, based on my experience, the dispatch centers are essential in these kinds of circumstances, because if there is a fire, the first thing people think is it's a fire. They don't think it is as a terrorist attack. Therefore, the dispatch centers and other first responder agencies need to be aware of this manual and possibility of such attacks so that they can consider other options as well.
Now, my son is he volunteers as a firefighter, and he's a medic in my city. And I mean, I think about the stuff he's talked some of the fires he's been to. He's talked about with me, and I think about these firefighters going into something to fight. They're not talking small potatoes, and that's the thing we have to realize. It's not, or it could be. I mean, it sounds like they're trying to advise people to attack small things and then grow. Is the other thing I had concern. Like if they do this, maybe they'll have more strength to do something else. Is what it seems like, because they even talk about in there about using AK-47s and small guns like handguns in this book also. So it's, I don't know, it's kind of sad is that they're putting this out, and they're, like you said, the target audience is younger, is not, the middle-aged adult. It is the young, it's the young person. It's not targeted to average older people, and
yes,
that's a concern. Now, do you consider that target mainly because it's through social media that these items are being targeted, or I was trying to figure out the reasoning that you see it as a targeting to younger kids or younger people?
These are usually like the most line of defenses abroad when it comes to terrorist organizations like the Al-Qaeda or ISIS. We need to consider the fact that terrorist organizations stay alive with three essential and linked to each other elements. The first is ongoing attacks, particularly for the ISIS and for the Al-Qaeda in the West. If they cannot carry out attacks in the West, for them or for their audience, they are weak. And the second element, essential element, which is tied to those attacks, is the propaganda through those attacks. Because once there is an attack in the West, think about the Western media. All the media covers that attack regardless of what it is. But we don't see the Western media covering the attacks in the East, in Syria, in Iraq, that much. Therefore, a small attack in the West provides them huge media power and media presence, basically a propaganda for them. And based on that propaganda, they recruit more people. They use that to mobilize their base to recruit more. So this is like a vicious cycle. You carry out a small attack in the West, dominate the media networks with that small attack or whatever that attack is, and then use that as a propaganda tool